It's my Wednesday off, and I'm out here sweating in the sweltering heat. It's humid. It's not real hot. I think I looked and it was 88. That's not real hot. That's not hot here. But the humidity is what's hot, like many other places. 88 would be really nice if we didn't have this humidity. So with this humidity also comes biting flies. We've got biting flies, and when you start sweating, they start biting. I'm out here trying to get some more of my compost put on my new herb gardens. I won't use these herb gardens until probably early spring, because I want them to be done right. And we've put newspaper down and compost down, and I'm putting some more compost on them right now. We're fixing to move that compost bin anyway, so I'm just getting the last I can out of it and putting on my new herb gardens. This humidity is just terrible. That's why I'm so hot and red. And of course, I've been out in the sun. I should have had a hat on because I think I'm getting a little burn. So I probably need to go grab my hat and put on. I did have a little sunscreen on, but that was early this morning. It probably doesn't sweat it off by now. Whew. So I guess I need to go get my hat and finish this up. I'm also going to go up to the big garden and see what up there I can pick. There's not a whole lot coming in right now. We had cold weather right up until and then too much rain. Cold weather and then too much rain. So we got a late start. So some of it's just now coming up. The horse got in the garden and trampled on some stuff. We had to replant that. So right now, so far this year, we're not doing real good, except tomatoes. We're going to have lots of tomatoes. We got tomato plants everywhere that are doing great. And I did do good with my little shaded herb garden. Has done good. It's got some herbs in it and lettuce in it. I need to pick that lettuce again. The basil needs picking. Up at the other garden, I think there is, we picked a little bit of onions. We left most of the onions to grow big, and they're doing real good. I have kale up there that's still doing okay. I'll show you my compost I'm getting out. It's beautiful. Compost is so easy. If you don't have a compost pile, you really need to start one, because it's so easy. So easy. You can just throw some stuff in there. There is nothing complicated about it. You throw some leaves and grass clippings, and I put shredded newspaper in it. And then you throw your kitchen scraps, your peels and green scraps. Not meat or grease. You don't want that in there. But other food scraps, like sometimes I throw my eggshells in there. Sometimes I keep my eggshells, crush them up and give them to the chickens, or I keep them and clean them up really, really good and grind them up for calcium, and I put that in my green smoothie. You've probably seen that video. If not, I'll tag that at the end and you can watch green breakfast smoothie, and I use my eggshells in that. So watch that video if you haven't. But compost is just so easy to do, and you can just throw it in a pile. Some people use the pallets to make sides, and we used some old wood. He's fixing to make me a new one. I think he's going to use like some pallet wood for that, and we're going to move it to a better location that will be easier for me, closer to the garden and closer to the chicken coop. I can poop in there. Horse poop, there's my horse. And I take my little red wagon out there and pick up horse poop and throw in there. And they say rabbits. I'd love to get rabbits. Lee won't let me get rabbits. But if I had rabbits, they say the rabbit manure is really good on the gardens and in the compost. And just all kinds of things that you can throw in your compost pile. And some people turn them. I hardly ever. We turn ours every once in a great while. So I'm fixing to show you my compost that I'm getting out of my bin. I've showed my compost bin before. Like I said, it's not the ideal one, but it works. Alright, there's my little red wagon. And there's my compost. It looks really good. There's a few big pieces in there. I don't worry too much about that. They'll compost down eventually. Especially on this garden. I'm not going to use it until probably spring. Maybe fall, but I don't know yet. But I'm not going to use it for a while. So I'm not too worried about any big pieces being on there. But we do also use it for potting soil to pot plants in. And when we do that, Lee usually takes a screen and kind of sifts that out for me to get the big sticks and big pieces that haven't composted down yet. He'll take just a screen, like the same screen that I dry herbs on. He will take that screen and sift this out for me to put in pots. So, like I said, it's not in the ideal location for us, and he just kind of threw that together, and it's just not ideal for us. So we are getting all that out of there, not going to put any more in there, and he's going to build a new one over in between the gardens and the chicken coop. He does kind of turn it sometimes because he digs worms out of it. We get huge worms out of there. So when he's summertime, when he's fishing, he's turning it some because he gets worms out of it. But for the most part, we don't do much to it. I'm over here by the garden now. I have a chair over here too. I keep a seat. I either keep a chair or a bench. I had Lee build me a few benches. We've got 8 acres. And we have the pecan trees, the big garden, these little gardens, little herb garden out back. Then I've got swings and toys for the kids on the other side over there. We had the pigs up at another part of the property. And then, of course, we forage the woods. We've got about 2 acres of woods back there. We forage that. So I had Lee build me a couple of benches in strategic spots throughout the property, so I can rest and especially when it's hot like this. That's something to think about when you start your when you're starting a new property and putting in gardens, and you might consider building little benches there. You can take chairs there, but sometimes if they're these little kind of chairs like this, they blow away. So there's a little shady spot. Find a shady spot. There's a little shady spot right on the end up here where the gardens are. Just perfectly. There's 2 trees in a little shady spot, and I'm gonna have to put a bench right in between those 2 trees. And sometimes there's a good breeze right through here. This is a good spot for a good breeze, so that helps. Also, the spot up under the pecan trees, the biggest pecan tree. Where Mr. Stringfield was found dead. There's always a breeze there, always. So that we're having a bench put there. We're going to really do a special bench there and dedicate it to Mr. Stringfield. Well, I'm relaxing on my swing now. I'm about done with composting. I wanted to talk a little more about composting. I've been composting for years, but I first learned about composting from my dad. But my dad always had big gardens, and we ended up moving to an orchard. He bought an orchard and still had the gas station, and started taking care of this big orchard with big garden. It had big gardens there. But the man who lived there before us had started this these gardens, and he didn't have a compost pile. He composted right straight in the garden. He had people come and dump. He got stuff from the local restaurants. He got stuff from he got newspapers. He got just unbelievable amount of stuff. Cardboard boxes and from all the different little stores and factories around, and he would go pick up their cardboard boxes and put them straight on the garden. He would dump the restaurant scraps straight on the garden. This is the shocker. There's a garment factory there, was a garment factory there in Clinton, Kentucky for many, many years. And he would get their scraps. They would have little pieces of material, little scrap material, and he would even get their scrap material and put on those gardens. That soil, that was the richest, blackest soil I ever seen in my life. And my dad had the most beautiful gardens. He had huge, beautiful gardens, and he done what they called truck patch. He would take fruits and vegetables in the back of his truck and go places and sell them, but he would just drive around. He would just drive down the street and stop at houses and sell it. And that's what they called truck patching back then. Most people go to farmers market now, but back then he would just put it in the back of his truck and drive down the street and sell produce out of the back of his truck. I'm not even sure you can do that now. You probably can. But anyway, that's when I first learned about composting, because all that stuff composted down and made the most wonderful gardens ever. But that man, I don't know how long he had been doing it. He had been doing it for years and years. He also had wood chips and stuff in there. He got the tree trimmers. He had them dumped there. He had all kinds of people dumping there, tree trimmers, and it just kept composting until that was the best soil I have ever seen in my entire life. My dad eventually sold the orchard. He got too old to take care of all that, and he sold the orchard and moved to a smaller farm that didn't have an orchard. He still always had a garden up until the day he died. But that's just a little bit about my first experience with composting and stuff like that was from that orchard that we lived at. It's going to take us some years to get to that point, but we're starting on it, working on it. We already had our big garden here. It had cows on it at one time, and then horses on it at one time. So we did have some manure in our soil. So we did have good soil in our big garden when we came here. So we've got pretty good soil in our gardens already. And now we're layering on top of that with our compost and stuff. So I guess you do what works for you, and this has been working really good for us so far. So we're going to keep doing it. So y'all stick with us and keep watching, and you can see how this Back to Eden garden goes for us and how these new herb beds go for us. This is my Wednesday vlog, so y'all give me a thumbs up and subscribe and give me a comment.